call the meeting to order for the SUNY Broome College Trustees Finance and Facilities meeting for April 12th. Item 1.1, can I have approval of the March 15, 2022 Finance and Facilities Committee meeting minutes?
I'll move it.
By Nick, second by Margaret. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So carried. Item 2.1, recommend approval of payroll certification. I have a motion.
I'll move it.
Moved by Nick.
I'll second.
Second by Margaret. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So carried. Item 2.2, recommend approval of administrative guild labor agreement. Can I have a motion?
I'll move it.
Can I have a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? Dr. Drum or Michael, do you want to comment?
No, I guess not, huh?
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any? L, I didn't hear you.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so carried. Item 2.3, recommend approval of resolution for sabbatical leaves. I have a motion.
So move.
Moved by Margaret, second.
Second.
Second by Nick. All in favor?
Aye.
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 So carried. Informational items, 3.1, President's Report.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you. Today is Convocation Day. Actually, one of my favorite days of the year. We always have a featured speaker who speaks on a highly relevant topic, and it could hardly be more relevant. The professor from Barnard College is expert on international conflict and conflict resolution. So could hardly be more timely. It's a day when we always apply, academic concepts to real world, big real world issues, and hardly anything is bigger than that today, unfortunately. So a real fun academic day for everyone involved, the faculty and students who put this together. I want to thank all of them and everybody who will attend. We have not heard anything regarding the state budget and its impact on higher education. Usually, right after it passes, we get a rundown from SUNY. But I think the big curve, the big $1.2 or $3 billion curve that was thrown in the last days of the session for the stadium in Buffalo ended up kind of rearranging the deck chairs. So it's a little disconcerting that we haven't heard anything yet on the details in the budget. And that's the big news or the big non-news right now. I'll leave it there for this morning, Mr. Chair, unless there are any questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. Any questions for Dr. Drum? Okay, item 3.2, Budget and Finance. Michael?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in your agenda packet was provided an updated multi-year financial sustainability plan. It's 2 pages, and the first page reflects that the college's plan is to increase its financial sustainability to the magnitude of about $5 million, with about $2.5 million with enrollment and retention initiatives, which is kind of the top 10 on the narrative page. And then there are 5 major cost reduction initiatives that equals the other $2.5 million to total $5 million plan. What you have in front of you is most of the data that's on the second page. I didn't include just because the numbers would be a little bit smaller a couple of years of prior year actuals as well as the forecast for the current year. All of that data we utilize, as well as the proposed budget, which we reviewed with you last month. That's really the first column. And that kind of creates, between the actual trends, the forecast for the current year, then the proposed budget, that's enough history to give us a pretty accurate identification of the assumptions the college wants to use in those 4 out years, those projected years of fiscal 23-24 through fiscal 26-27. So I'm just going to briefly highlight these. I'll get in a little more detail at the board meeting on Thursday. So just want to highlight, most of this you're very familiar with. The first major one, this page is on the revenue side of the sustainability plan. I just kind of remind the board that Middle States and its accreditation findings and recommendations and collegial advice applauded the college for having a multi-year financial plan and strongly encouraged us, especially in light of the COVID dynamics, to ensure that the college updated this at least every year. And of course, during the last couple of years of presentations to both the county exec and to the county legislature, they also felt it was very important that the college have a plan, especially as the federal stimulus funds were being utilized. What was the plan to ensure that the county wasn't going to have to step up and significantly increase its support in lieu of the federal stimulus funds declining and finally ending a couple of years from now. So this is this is a prudent way to approach both the short term and the long term. And so that's really the purpose of this document being developed a couple of years ago. And certainly during more challenging times, it becomes a more important document as we proceed forward. So on the revenue side, what the college is projecting is basically flat enrollment for the next several years. It goes up and down a little bit. Next year is a 7% decline. As we reviewed the budget for next year, our assumption was it would be up slightly under 2%. After high school graduation rates decline 7% this coming next June, then it goes up a couple of percent. And, that's kind of the college's leading indicator, but it's not the only indicator that we use to develop the enrollment. But I think over the next 4 years, a fairly, conservative assumption would be net flat, net FTEs, as well as fast forward being flat on average over the next 5 years. Really, the key item that the budget represents a change in is the number of courses that are offered by the college in light of the fact that enrollment has substantially declined over the past 2 years and modestly declined over the last 5 years, both due to COVID over the last couple of years, as well as just the demographics continue to deteriorate, both at a regional, state, and mostly at the national level as well. So in order to ensure an efficient utilization of our cost structure, in the plan is the assumption that the relationship between the number of courses and the number of students that enroll in the college, the ratio has to improve. The efficiency has to improve, which predominantly is driven by average class size, the number of low enrolled courses, which is the metric that's predominantly used because of the labor agreement, are courses that have 11 and under students. And then we also take a very close look at what the maximum class size is. And depending on what type of class it is, whether it's distance learning or it's a in-person physically on campus class, it may range, most of them, the maximum may be between 18 and 22. So those are really the variables that are managed that reflects what the relationship is between the number of sections and the number of FTEs. So what we're saying is that average class size needs to increase. And on average, over these almost 2,000 sections now, going to about 1,700 sections 5 years from now, we're saying that those total number of courses, the average class size has to grow by about 1 per class. Now, that's not exactly the way it will happen, just given a number of variables that impact what the class size is going to be. But I'm saying on average, if you took all those sections, the average class size needs to go up by a little over 1 in order to get to the 60% section to net FTE ratio in fiscal year 26-27. So that's kind of our section ratio. That predominantly is on the cost side, but we have some baseline information that we have here on the revenue side. Tuition increase, we're saying over the next 4 to 5 years, reflects basically the tuition increase over the last 6 to 7 years, which is about a little under 4%. Likewise, out of state would be the same. It's double the in-state rate, but the rate would increase would be comparable at just under 4%. The state aid being where the assumption is that FTEs would be flat. Our current formula, and I think the governor proposed 100% floor, which at least preliminarily was supported by both houses minimally at 100% of the floor. So the floor is what our last year actual was, which is about $13 million. So you kind of see state aid being flat, being if our FTE assumption is that the number of FTEs is going to be flat, then we're not going to see any material increase in the state aid. Sponsor share, likewise, we're factoring a conservative 1% increase that's been on average, other than the COVID year where it was cut by 7.5%. Generally, the increases averaged about 1% a year. Now, when you really take a look at that state aid number at 13 million and sponsor share at 7.8 million, that's almost 21 million. That's about 40% of our revenue that in this sustainability plan stays pretty flat. So that puts a lot of pressure on the variable revenue, which is tuition and other student fees and charges, and puts a tremendous amount of pressure on the expense side of the equation. Then the other fees, student fees, other charges, rental of the ice rink, et cetera, out of county chargebacks for students that are within New York State, but out of Broome County. All of that revenue is in that projection from about 12 million up to about 13.5 million. So if we go to the next slide, so that's the revenue dynamics. If we go to the next slide, then this is the expense side. Again, because courses and sections ultimately convert to payroll costs, this is really why we use this ratio, because once you determine the net FTEs and have a fairly robust metric to determine the relationship between the number of courses and sections you offer related to your enrollment, that drives the ratio. And that ultimately, once we know the number of sections, it's fairly easy to then calculate minimally the instructional costs. And so in that personnel line, between the 28.9 million and the almost 30 million over that 5-year period, about 45% of that payroll cost is instructional. So that's a pretty significant sum that's really driven by the variable dynamics of enrollment, the number of sections, which then translates into your personnel costs. The rest of the budget is really the non-instructional side, which is approximately 55% of the personnel line. You see there's our assumption, net the sections being reduced over that 5-year period. If you factored that out of this, it would basically be a 2.5% increase per year, which is generally pretty consistent with the parameters articulated related to salary and wage adjustment, and right on target with the approved guild contract that you just took action on. The fringe benefit rate over the last couple of years is at about 52%. So we're using that as the number, even though the college's position on bargaining is to increase the employee share of the premium of health insurance and push out the vesting time period prior to being eligible for retiree health insurance. Both of those proposals by the college should help mitigate this percentage against payroll. On the capital repairs and equipment, I think I've mentioned this before, the range is about $1 million, a little under $1.1 million for the proposed budget next year, up to about $1.3 million. The college is using a 5% increase. 1.3 million in 26-27 is 1% of the college's $127 million of fixed assets. So, that's probably a minimum number. Generally, the metric out there in the financial arena is, probably 3 to 4%. And that's exclusive of the capital plan that we submit. This is just ongoing maintenance and repairs, basic maintenance and repairs to the existing infrastructure. So this has generally been an area that's taken the hit in an effort to balance the budget over the last 3-4 years prior to COVID. This tends to be a little more discretionary, and as well as the next line item, contractual. Some of that's a little more discretionary, and to the extent that the sections have been a little higher than budgeted, then the areas that the college has reduced or deferred has been this capital repair equipment, as well as some of the discretionary areas in contractual. But as that's been trimmed, and as you can tell, it's a fairly small amount of the budget. Again, payroll and benefits, 84%. The combined between capital and contractual is about 8.5 in the last year of the plan. There's not a lot of magnitude here to offset 85% of the budget if payroll costs are above budget. So the contractual side, a modest 2% increase over the 5-year horizon, which gets us to about going from about 51.6 million for next year to a little over 54 million, or about 2.5 million, which is fairly lean. So the big number that we're being very prudent with is the next line, which is the HERF federal stimulus funds. You have it in the 2-page hard copy that was sent to you. The last 2 years, both in the forecast for the current year, we're at about 3.5 million for stimulus funds forecasted to be needed in order to ensure a balanced budget. The year prior, the audited that was just presented to the board last month was about 3.5 million. So, a key piece of modest expense growth combined with instructional costs needing to be more in alignment in terms of the number of sections being reduced in light of the number of FTEs that have been reduced. The effort combined is to reduce the college's reliance on federal stimulus funds in order to balance the budget. So last couple of years at 3.5 million, 2.5 million is what was approved for the budget for next year. And then you have about 3 years in the neighborhood of about $1 million average. And then as the college gets past kind of the last major bump in high school graduation rate declines in 2 years, and as that ratio continues to get more and more efficient, you see in that last year that stimulus funds are only needed at about a $350,000 level. So, from our vantage point, the college has represented, the college needs time to implement and respond and react to, especially the 2-year dynamics with COVID and the almost 30% decline in enrollment over that 2.5-year period. And, a number of the enrollment and retention initiatives that have been presented to the board and will continue to be presented to the board as we make progress with those major initiatives, that will at least minimally maintain enrollment at the current levels. And this being a conservative plan, I think we're being cautiously optimistic that maybe we might see a 1 to 2 to 3% improvement in enrollment as those initiatives get more and more mature over the next couple of years. So, at the end of fiscal year 26-27, federal stimulus funds run out. I would also want to disclose to the board that in addition to these federal stimulus funds, the college still has unrestricted fund balance at about 5.7 million, which is about 10.7% of last year's operating expense. So we're still maintaining one of our college's top priorities was to get fund balance at about a 5 to $6 million range, which again is that 10% ballpark number in between the 5 and 15% that both SUNY, Middle States, and other financial entities would like to see. So I think this is a pretty reasonable and prudent plan. A lot of details behind this as we go forward, but I think it's a fair representation, at least from my perspective as Chief Financial Officer, that I think this is a plan to get to a financially sustainable place over time, and I'd be more than willing to answer any questions that the board may have.
Any questions for Michael?
Yeah, I have a question. The federal funds, it keeps going down 1,196,908 and then 350. Is that guaranteed, or can they pull that back?
No, that's guaranteed. The college has already applied. It has to apply this year for the last year of submission for lost revenue. There's a very complex format for the college to submit the amount of revenue it's lost due to COVID for enrollment. It's a standard form, so we can't manipulate how that calculation, it's kind of a 3-year prior rolling average. And so the college anticipates, based on the grant award the college received, that the board accepted a couple of years ago, that will maximize our receipt of those grant funds. And the good news is that, not that we needed it, other than for some mental health funding that was made available late in the process. The feds approved an extension for the documentation to get reimbursed for these funds to June 30th of 2023. However, for the most part, we'll be eligible for this year based on our lost revenue. We'll be able to maximize our grant award during this current fiscal year. So all this federal stimulus money that we're projecting in the plan is all, we've actually received the grant award by the federal government. So it's just a matter of filing the documentation, but we have access to the cash as we speak. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, 3.2.2 budget forecast, is that already covered in your sustainability plan from what I see?
Yes, I would just say that it's the forecast is the same as last month.
Yep.
Need about $3.5 million of stimulus funds to balance the current year's budget.
Okay, thank you. 3.2.3 budget transfers, 3.2.4 grant approvals, and 3.2.5 investment reports are in your package. 3.2.6 student village housing report. Dr. Ross? You're muted.
Good morning. The housing report is a standard report. There have been 90 monthly bond payments made through April the 10th.
Thank you, Dr. Ross.
Mhm.
Any questions for Dr. Ross? Okay, 3.3.1 facilities update.
Thank you, Anthony. You have my report in front of you, and in deference to Convocation Day, I can give a more complete report at the board meeting on Thursday.
Thank you very much, Dave. 3.3.2 human resource, Lynn.
Good morning. The personnel report reflects activity for the month of March and is for informational purposes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Lynn. Dr. Drum, I know you mentioned about an executive session, but I would rather do that on Thursday when the whole board's there to talk about the impasse and other issues.
That's fine.
Okay, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
Margaret, second by Nick. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you all on Thursday.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Anthony?
Have a good day.